Good morning, this is Dr. Alan Neum. In this video, I'm going to talk about root position part writing, this time moving the bass note by a fourth or a fifth. There are three different ways of doing this, so in this video I'm going to begin with just one method, common tone stepwise. Now these guidelines can get a little bit confusing because there's lots of little details, but always keep in mind the things I have here, which I've already mentioned. You want to make your writing easy to perform, in this case easy to sing, and you want it to sound good. So as far as easy to sing, you may say, well, what if I'm writing for instruments? Well, this still can apply. Musicians, instrumentalists, like to see things in a logical manner that sounds good. And most instruments are written to sound like the voice or to be able to imitate the voice. Even as a pianist, I still try to get a singing line, and we oftentimes talk about achieving a singing line. So it doesn't hurt to use this as a starting point. It makes it easy for the performer and for the listener, and it goes together with sounds good, because if it's not easy to sing or not easy to play, it is not going to sound good generally. So under the category of easy to sing, there are four things to think about. First of all, if you have a choice, it's always good to keep common tones. So these first three things are about how to move the voice from one to the next. Keeping a common tone is number one, and that looks something like this. So if you have, let's say the soprano does something like this, to keep a common tone, you just don't move it. Okay. Or you can move it stepwise, either up or down. That's always very easy to sing, and I'm talking about in the context of the scale. Or you can use a small leap. So the small leap can be a third, like this, or maybe a fourth. Anything bigger than a third or a fourth, well, it starts getting a little bit more challenging. You have to be careful because it can cause things like voice crossing. It makes it a little bit harder to reach. Okay, so what does voice crossing look like? Okay, you might see something like this. So this is voice crossing, where you have one voice above the other, its neighbor. Here, this would be the bass, and this would be the tenor. The other one looks something like this. Suppose they begin here, and then the bass sings this note. Again, if you do this, it's crossing over where the tenor was. So the bass is hearing that E, and then it has to sing an F. That's also a type of voice crossing. Always double the root. If you have to, you can omit the fifth. If you omit the fifth, you can have three roots and a third. That's also a possibility. We're not going to look at that right now. For now, I recommend putting all parts of the chord. So what does that mean? Two roots, a third, and a fifth. So this is the voicing we're going to use. We're working with triads right now. We will consider seventh chords in Theory 2. So for now, we're using triads, and we're going to move the root by a fourth or a fifth. So it might look something, for example, like this. I'm going to start out by just writing the first chord, knowing that I'm leaping up with the bass here. I'm going to put the tenor rather high so that I don't have to worry about crossing over where the bass is. I'm going to use an open voicing here. So open means that there is more than an octave or more between the soprano and the tenor. And now I'm going to move the voices. So the technique we're using is common tone stepwise. So we're going to look for, first of all, the common tone, and then we're going to try to move the other two voices by step. Well, C, E, G, the common tone, I hope you realize, is G. So here it is. We're going to not move the alto. It's always good to do this because you don't have to worry about any kind of parallels. Okay, and in fact, the reason for learning these new methods here is you don't have to look for parallels. Okay? Parallels reduce the sound. So in other words, this is sort of in the sounds good category. Whoops. Oh, well, I kind of like that. No parallels. What happens is if you have parallels, they reduce the texture from 4 down to 3, down to 2, depending on how many you have. If you have 1, it's going to make 4 parts sound like 3 parts. So you do this too often and your music ends up sounding thin, unconvincing, a little bit weak. So we don't want that. We want our music to sound full, and we want the voices to sound independent, and so you can recognize the motion between the different voices. Alright, we could either move the other 2 voices up or down. Now, to recognize which way to move them, think of the notes in this, in the G major triad. Immediately, your mind should go, GBD. Okay, GBD, and then you look. Okay, the E. The E could either go up to F or down to D. Well, if you go up to F, that's wrong, because there's no F in that chord. Unless we make it a G7, but we're not doing that. We're making a triad, so it has to go down. Both voices are going to go down in the same direction. So pretty easy here. I'll just put that in parentheses, and the tenor is going to go down to B, and you're done. So let me just mark the 2 steps for you. Here they are, and voila. This is great because you can move very quickly and you don't have to worry about checking for a parallel, because you know in this type of method you're not going to get one. So the first chord sounds like this. And the second one, okay, sounds pretty good to me. And it's staying open, just so you know. We're done. So that's it for this video. Try this out yourself. Move the voices using common tone and step, and you won't have to worry about parallels. This is sort of a shortcut. Now this root motion of a 4th or 5th, as you can see here, this is moving a 5th, but if you inverted it, in other words, if instead of going like this, I went the other direction, that would be a 4th down. So you can see they're just inversions of each other. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video when I show you the second method for moving the voices.